Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. When I see that somebody kind of brands themselves as somebody who was a quote unquote rage quitter, that immediately gets my attention. I'm sure that gets a lot of people's attention, but it gets my attention because I've been through a lot of stuff in my life and I have had my fair share of situations where work has made me feel a certain way, and I wanted to take that kind of a step and leave the job that I was at and just flat out quit, whether it was an actual rage or a more controlled chill rage, if there is such a thing. But Paul Byrne has a really interesting story on not only on rage quitting. I don't want to necessarily have that define Paul today because he's doing some amazing things in the entrepreneurial space. And he is the president of Razoyo, and he is also the president of Refactored Group, and he's very much involved in the SaaS web-based space, and I can't wait because I don't really know a ton about SaaS and a lot of the things that Paul specializes in. So I'm real excited to have Paul on the show today on Mark My Words. Welcome. How you doing today, Paul?
I'm doing great, Mark. It's good to be here. It's good to meet you.
Good. Great to meet you. Great to have you here. And I don't know. I have had my battles with just working not only in corporate America, but just jobs in general where I just felt like I wasn't being treated the way I should have been, or things weren't going the way they should have been. You can fill in the blank. So when I saw that the whole like rage quitting thing was something that you wanted to talk about, that was something that I definitely, not only for myself, but maybe for others who have been going through those kind of things and emotions. And I think it's a very important topic, just for the sake of mental health and just learning in general. So I'm going to start this off by going in the Wayback Machine because you are somebody who specializes in technology in general. I know you went to school for like electronics engineering, and you kind of made the pivot to languages for a while, and you kind of like tried a few different things, but I feel like your heart is in like technology. Was that always the case?
Yeah. So I guess something that might also be interesting to know about me, my father was a rocket scientist. And
Wow.
I mean, professionally, not just he was a really smart person. He was an actual rocket scientist. And he was head of the missile systems division at Raytheon for a while. And his, so you can imagine growing up in a household where not only my father had a PhD, but pretty much all of his friends as well. There was no room for kind of slacking off in math and science at our house. And I remember as a kid, I was I would take my math homework to my dad and I would ask for his help. And the biggest problem was that he was so advanced in math that I I couldn't understand what he was trying to explain to me. And so I'd sit, I'd listen politely for, half an hour, and then I'd be like, just give me the book. I'll go I'll go figure this out on my own. And that was before, we had AI, before we had YouTube or anything. I had the book, I had, the library if I wanted to go to the library. But yeah, there was a certain amount of pressure, let's put it this way, on me. And I don't think my father purposely put it on me. It was more something that just kind of came from the environment. But there was a certain amount of pressure to do well in math, in science, and in any sort of engineering type. Like if I took computer algebra, that was as close as we had to any sort of computer class when I was in high school. And so definitely, yeah, you kind of caught on early on. That was definitely part of my life. And I started out, I quizzed out of a good chunk of, and I would say most of the first semester, including calculus, when I started at the University of Missouri Rolla in the early 80s. And so I was taking some pretty advanced courses there. I had actually, electrical engineering was my interest, and I started in that. And I don't really know why. This is another one of those moments where it was kind of almost an out of body experience, but I decided after one semester not to go back. Now, I was, and I still am, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was preparing, within less than a year to go on a mission after that. So I kind of wanted to earn some money and do some things before that. But the job I ended up getting was selling Hewlett-Packard computers and calculators in the only HP shop in Wichita, Kansas, where I grew up. And so I was still, very firmly within, the technology space, I would say, until the time I went on my mission. And I went on my mission to Italy. And of course, I didn't know where I was going to go. You just get a letter, a little while before you leave that says, here's where you're going. And so I went to Italy. I was in Sicily and southern Italy for a couple of years. For that experience, and I became very proficient in Italian. And when I came back, I was soon engaged, and I decided that I needed to get out of my bachelor's degree as quickly as I could because I wanted to get an MBA. And so I switched to Italian because not only did I have all my math and other, like a lot of prerequisites, which I had taken care of at Rolla, at UMR, I also had, I was able to quiz out of a full semester of Italian. And so by the time I got to school, I was married. And so I had someone who could help me with my Italian homework if I ever needed any, right? And I got a degree in Italian. And then about a year after that, I went to graduate school in Milan, Italy, at the University of Bocconi. They had an MBA program, and it was the first year that they actually had an English language program. But I took half my classes in English and half in Italian.
Very impressive.
Yeah, so I became very proficient, and I worked after that in Europe for a German consumer electronics company. And that was a really, really interesting experience. I don't know, we want to go into many of the details on that, but I lived in Germany for a year. I lived in France for a couple of years. I was helping the German company open up subsidiaries across Europe because it was the time when the customs borders were coming down across Europe. And so they were going from an importer exporter model to a subsidiary distributor model. and I kind of helped them in that transformation, and that was pretty exciting. So
Awesome.
that's how I
So
got involved really in kind of marketing, on the marketing side of things.
So let me jump in with something that you kind of alluded to, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Mormon Latter Day Saints
Mm-hmm.
sector of the world is probably one of the most represented groups that I've had maybe on this show,
Really?
and oh yeah,
That's
like
funny.
a couple of folks from like Utah and just
Mm-hmm.
that whole group, and all
Yeah.
of you guys are like super duper smart, and you're all like entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
it might be unfair to ask, but I'm just curious to know like what is in the air as far as like
Is there some
maybe
water we all drink? Yeah, that makes us
yeah, because
entrepreneurs.
is there anything do you think that's going on, like
I
educationally or whatever?
I think there are a couple of things that contribute to that. I think there's a large there's a certain section of the church when you go on a mission, you spend 2 years at the beginning. You're very unsure of yourself, and by the end, you come off. You're not cocky, but you are confident, and you kind of have met your limits. And I think it's good to have gone through an experience where you've sort of really faced your own limits and also built your own strengths, and your own confidence to become an entrepreneur. I feel like that may be part of it. I also think that one of the things that's very helpful is to have a what I would call like a financial footing, which is solid. Before you go off and form your own company, you want to make sure your family's not going to starve, and you're not going to get kicked out of your house. I, families usually don't starve, but you could get kicked out of your house, etc. But we spend a fair amount of time in the church on self-reliance and training on self-reliance, and it's a very good preparation, I think, to be an entrepreneur, because you sort of you become resourceful. So uh and you may have a cushion built up. We tend to be rather conservative in our own management of our own finances. Plus, we don't drink, we don't have a lot of the vices that could be very expensive, and so maybe our cost of living is a little bit lower than some folks. I don't know. I think it's a combination of those things, and probably, we have a social network built in for those of us who are active in the church, where if we fail or if something goes wrong or whatever, we have this network of people, kind of moral support that we can rely on. And we know like that we have those people. Like I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who their entire value is in their companies and in their business. And if they have a failure or they have to go back too many steps, it kills them. And I think we kind of have a certain perspective that, this is not everything I am. This is not my worth. And, I have a different maybe perspective on that, so that I can fail in business and still be a valuable person, and still value myself as well. So I think it's less tightly tethered to our success in entrepreneurship. So it's just my thoughts. I honestly, I don't really know.
So I've done well over 100 episodes of this show at this point, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that might be one of the best answers to a question that I've ever asked. I
Oh, good.
feel like that to me, as I listen to you talk, I'm just like, yup, yup, yup. That I feel like you really nailed it as far as the key points on what the answer to that could be, because it's one of those things where I think I see it, but to actually hear you lay it
Mhm.
out like that, I'm sitting here, I'm like, yes, that's it. He's
Yeah.
nailing it. No, I think it's just a different set of values. And I think that some of us have, like, you know, certain number of those things that you just rattled off, but maybe not all of them. And
Yeah.
if we do, they're an entrepreneur who is as successful as you, or
Mhm.
maybe more so. So, I
Could
mean,
be.
I mean, it,
Could
those are
be.
those are all really great qualities, and it just
Yeah.
speaks to how they prepare you for life. Because I view myself as having a lot of those same attributes that you kind of like
That's
round
great.
round
Yeah.
off, but I don't have any of that actual influence in me. That just wasn't my life. So as a
Yeah.
result, you have a different kind of person than, say, all of my LDS and
Yeah.
Utah
Sure.
and Mormon guests and friends that I've had on here. So I'm glad that I asked that, because that was an amazing answer. So
Thanks. Yeah, and
what?
there's probably a couple of small things too that do have a big impact. For one is if for those of us who have been on missions, you learn to deal with strangers and talk to you become comfortable with dealing with a lot of people who you've never met before. Sometimes those people can be hostile, and you just become, more comfortable with that situation of not knowing who you're dealing with, of trying to build sort of a relationship of trust with someone, and that sort of thing. So that's definitely a skill that you acquire on your mission. And then the other is, you have a lot of public speaking opportunities. We don't have a paid ministry, and so you may ask to speak in church a couple times a year, and then you may ask to lead a class, be asked to lead a class, etc. So there's a certain amount of public speaking, even in situations like this, where I think it's helpful that you can express yourself, probably better than the average person who's thrown into that situation.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned one of my favorite words, which is resourceful.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's a skill that acquired due to like obstacles I've had in
yeah,
my life. I've had a lot of people dismiss me, and, I could go on and on. And you learn some of those skills when you're a person like me,
hmm,
just out in the wild, so to speak, rather
yeah,
than in a more structured situation.
yeah,
So, uh, yeah, I just think it's really amazing that they instill all of those attributes in you. And yeah, it really, uh, yeah, it makes you understand why so many people from that walk of life are
yeah,
entrepreneurs, and explains why every one of them I'm just like super duper impressed with.
yeah.
So uh let's get into the heart of our
the,
story
the
here,
rage quitting.
the race quiz. So I
Yeah,
looked at your just looking at your LinkedIn here, because that's what I
yeah,
do with this show. You worked for some awesome brands. You had some awesome jobs, and on the surface, it would look like, wow, this guy is money in the bank. He's got some great things going. What what went wrong, and when?
sure. I mean, I've had several disappointments along the way. So, when I was working in the ad agency, I was working, the advertising and marketing budget. And when you're on the agency side of things, you're at the very tail end of a budget that fluctuates wildly with the performance of the economy. So I ended up getting laid off from my job. I was the senior vice president of new business at Byrne, and a division of Havas at the time. And those agencies change names so quickly, it probably doesn't mean anything to anyone at this point. But we so I was looking for a new job, and I'd been out of work for a little while, and there was nothing going on in marketing. Marketing and PR just completely got knocked off the rails during the dot-com bust and the Enron era. And that's when that was. And I ended up kind of taking sort of I don't know, like a pay for performance job with an old boss of mine who was involved in a business that sold these discount packages door to door, both in businesses and residentially. And I kind of helped sign up some clients, some large clients. Cinemark was one of those. And there were some other ones. And I was kind of known as a guy that brought in some big deals to the company. But I got paid per piece, like on how much my product sold. And I also then started picking up some marketing responsibilities for them. So finally I became, after 7 years, I was the CMO of that group. I had helped them establish an online presence. So we were selling things online, and that was pretty early. We're talking about 2006, 2007, kind of in the beginning age of e-commerce. Not the very beginning, but certainly, the infancy stage still. And there were some changes that took place in that company where I ended up kind of in a different division that was doing sales in retail locations like Sam's Club and Costco and Best Buy and so forth. And we were picking up clients like DirecTV, and I can't remember the other one. I think T-Mobile was a client. They were doing some mobile phone sales, etc. So there was definitely it was a very different vibe, and I was dealing with a different group of people. And I got to the point where I was very frustrated with a lot of those people. And I felt, the environment to me felt toxic. I don't know, if they would have said it was that way. It either just became a very bad match for me, or I was thrown into a frustrating environment, and it was a bad match for most people. I don't know. I don't really kind of judge them, but I got to the point where I felt like I had been kind of mistreated in some meetings. I was frustrated. I didn't really know kind of what some of the expectations were, and I felt like the goalposts were just kind of constantly changing in that environment, and I wasn't really comfortable with that. And so there was a meeting, little bit of heated discussion in that meeting, I would say. Some of it directed at me, and I was at that point, I just said, that's it. And I hung up the phone. It was an online meeting. And I hung up the phone, and I just turned around, wrote an email to my boss, and said, who is still a friend of mine, by the way. So we got over this rough spot. But I wrote him an email. I said, effective immediately, I resign. And I got up and I walked out. And I would have thought that that experience would have been a lot more difficult. But really, the most difficult part was, I had a 20-minute drive home to come up with a story to tell my wife why I no longer had a job, right? And I can happily report that we've now been married 38 years. So we also overcame that obstacle as well.
Yeah, that's a doozy of an obstacle. It's one thing to quit a job and it just be about you and the organization or the boss, but then to come home to the spouse, that's like, in my mind, just imagining, that's like the worst part of all. So it's amazing that you guys were able to work through that and just on all around move on from it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
we had 3 kids. One was in college. Like not having an income was could potentially be a hardship. But kind of going back to some of the things we talked about before, I had socked away some cash and had enough of a rainy day fund where, as opposed to the about 9 years prior to that, when I was laid off and I only had a few months of float available to me, I now had enough that I could take some risks with my career. And to be honest, like my boss was really gracious about the whole thing. He kind of helped me with some health benefits for a while and kind of get on my feet. I did some work for that company as a consultant early on, and it was enough that I really appreciate him for that. Him and the other people in the organization who continued to not just respect but value me and just kind of saw me in a different role as an outside consultant, and that was much more comfortable and I got a lot more done. I was way more productive, and but at the same time I was kind of building up my other business, and but I didn't leave with a plan, and I just left kind of on emotion, knowing that I was probably going to be okay financially and that I would make it through. And so it was kind of an emotional thing, I guess, more than anything else. But I'm really, really happy that I made that step. And honestly, I'm kind of happy that I was allowed to do that by the people around me. So
that's
um,
amazing that
yeah,
you were supported even after that whole incident because I don't know if that kind of thing happens very often. And it speaks
mhm,
to something that you mentioned a little while ago, which is you kind of alluded to you weren't sure if they were just perceiving you or things going on
yeah,
differently than you did. And I think that's an important thing to think about when you are in a work environment or even
yeah,
in life in general. That sometimes when you're feeling a certain way, and maybe I'm saying all this to pep talk myself too, but
yeah,
you can get into situations where you feel misunderstood,
yeah,
unsupported, not heard, and it can leave you with a lot of hard feelings. But
yeah,
sometimes, if you get in a situation where you happen to open up about it, you might actually find out that they're completely and legitimately surprised that you feel that way and
yeah,
oh, there's such a melting pot of values and approaches to life and work and a billion other things I could throw in the pot. And people are complicated is really the long and the short of it. I
yeah.
mean,
Well, I could have walked away and just completely cut all ties to them, and I was probably frustrated enough to do that, but I didn't. And it kind of, I think, goes back to one of the things I learned from. I had a boss when I was in France. It's a French guy. His name was Philippe Gerbois, and Philippe was the president of the company, and I was kind of his right hand guy in France. We worked for the German company, and uh, I I did something. I kind of messed something up, and it was not a small thing. I had made a mistake, and I did everything I could to clean it up, but there was certainly some damage. And I was sitting around with Philippe, uh, and I was like, man, do you still support me? Do you still want me here? What do you think, after that? And he always said, like, I, before this, I respected you. I appreciated, things you'd done. I saw you had a lot of strengths and I enjoyed working with you. He says, I just don't, turn on somebody for one thing, which, is one event among many. And that attitude of not writing people off, I think is a certain amount of, I was young, I was 27 at that time. But that lesson stuck with me and helped me to be, less judgmental, more open, and also, realizing that, sometimes this relationships, you just got to work through things, and sometimes things need to change. And I think they did. And I think the way, I don't recommend people do it and make that change the way I did. This is not a career recommendation, but I think, if you're feeling that way, you need to evaluate that situation and maybe make a plan to make it change. So that's
Well,
just kind of what I learned.
everything happens for a reason. I mean, you left that job the way you did for a reason. You
Yeah.
were put in that situation for a reason. You moved on and made the steps that you made, for a reason.
Yeah.
And I I would be interested in knowing, so you wound up leaving, you were
Yeah.
consulting. uh how did you build yourself up into the entrepreneur you are today?
Yeah. So I started, within months after I left that company. I had a friend, incidentally from church, who had a side business, and the company that I rage quit from was a client from them in that side business. And it's not necessary to go into all the details, but let's just say, like, he invited me to become a partner in that business. And and that business, we were building it together. We weren't making very much money, but we were keeping afloat enough, and so kind of moving things forward. And we just, we were trying a lot of different things. And I soon, we had a product on license from another company that we were selling online on their behalf. And I didn't know anything, but I found this platform called Pro Stores, which was owned by eBay. And I had created that store, and we were selling these things online and advertising via email and other methods. And that platform was made for small businesses. It was We soon became the largest merchant on that platform in Texas. And so eBay invited me to um, this eBay online, or sorry, eBay Live event down in Dallas. So I just drove down there and I met up with the heads of the Pro Stores division, and we got into conversations over dinner, etc. And they asked me to set up a team to take over their pre sales support. So and they're like, "Can you do that?" And I'm like, "Sure." I'm gonna, we're gonna make this work. And so so I did that, and that was really that relationship became the genesis of what came next, because then I got to know all these other online merchants, and I was able to, when eBay sunset the Pro Stores platform, so it's no longer around, and they had just purchased Magento, and they decided they were getting rid of the platform called Magento Go, which was their software as a service, their SaaS platform for e-commerce. I knew all these merchants that needed a home, they needed to move somewhere, etc. And so we saw this as an opportunity, and with eBay's permission, I started building Magento, which is an open source software. Started building Magento websites for them. We moved some of them to another company called BigCommerce, which we later became kind of friends with, and we're now partners. We're in their partner group. But that got me into e-commerce, and it kind of snowballed from there. So we started with Magento, then not everything went great at Magento. There were some hiccups with the release of Magento 2 that really damaged the revenue streams of the Magento agencies. And so we spread out, did some other platforms, became proficient in those, and grew the business that way for quite some time until 2020. And we had built some pretty sophisticated internal tools with this programming language called Elixir. And we realized that we could build applications with this, and we got an opportunity to do that through a referral. And we built this system. And then from there, we got referral to build another system. And then, somebody on the e-commerce side needed a system. So we ended up building a number of different web applications that are software as a service applications, SaaS. And we also built our own. So we built a system that's a plugin for e-commerce platforms, Pro Stores, Magento, WooCommerce. I think we support Oro anyway. A number of different platforms that you can use, and it basically automates the legal compliance required at checkout for online gun merchants. So anybody selling firearms online. So we make, it helps them and reduces their paperwork dramatically in terms of, being able to ship to the appropriate places and making sure they have certificates and, all that is buttoned up for an audit in case they have one. And those places are constantly audited. So that so now we also not only build software as a service applications for other companies, we actually run our own SaaS businesses. We have one that's launched now. We have another one that's launching in the near future. And that's really become kind of our passion. We still love the e-commerce space. And I still have that same team over there. But my growth over the past 5 years has come from the bespoke software development, which is far more complex, but my developers love working on it. And it's fun. It's more challenging. I think it's more interesting. I meet a lot of people that are, have really interesting ideas and don't know how to realize them. And then we help them realize those ideas. And so it's, it's a great match, and I love working on that business.
So, do you feel a difference in yourself as far as like feeling more fulfilled and just the overall feeling that work gives you now compared to how it like maybe made you feel when you had your breaking point, or just even throughout your career? Do you see a difference in yourself?
So when you run your own business, you impact everything. And I'm fortunate. I have two minority shareholder partners. One is my CTO, and the other one is the head of sales. And we work together really well. We've been working together for 15 years, and I enjoy I enjoy the working environment more. And do I still have to do things I don't want to do? Yeah. I like that's part of being an entrepreneur. Sometimes you do. I had a very unpleasant experience today, but sometimes that just that's part of the job, and it's my the buck stops here. So I've got to just accept that. But overall, on average, on my good days are a lot better than they were. The highs are higher. I don't think the lows are any lower, and I don't think I have more lows. I have maybe a little bit more stress just because I know that I've got 25 salaries and families, who are depending on me making this business a success, not just my own. But yeah, I do what I want, and I have a lot of freedom to choose what to do, what not to do. And I've got great people around me right now. It's the best team I've ever worked on. Uh, and honestly, the best team I think I've ever met. And so I kind of accomplished my goal, which was I quit the corporate life because I didn't like the kind of person I was becoming, and because uh, I didn't want to work for a company that I didn't like working at, and that I didn't like the way they did business. Well, it's my company. I like the way I do business. Uh, and so I think that's the big difference to me. I think I could be happy in a corporate job. My wife thinks I could never be happy in a corporate job, but I could readjust if I had to. It's just I don't have to, and I don't foresee that. By the time I'm done working, I'll need to. So uh, I
Well,
I think I'll keep going with the entrepreneur thing.
I'll tell you what, it's very important for any company you work for to have similar values
Yeah,
that you have. And I think the idea of values and things like that gets overlooked because we're so eager to land a job. And I know some of us, like me, I can tell you after we're done, but my day job is a truly, truly amazing job. It's a dream job. And I think if if something were to happen to my day job, I don't know if I could work anywhere else anymore
Hmm.
because not only am I so used to the culture and the values of the company I'm with, which totally line up with my values,
Yeah,
but I have been around enough to know that there is a pretty good chance if I go anywhere else, I may not be able to fit into that culture because
right.
between running my own show and doing more and more things for myself outside my day job, but just
Yeah,
from being a part of this amazing organization. Like, I was just thinking about this like a couple hours ago, actually. And I was like, man, I don't know. Like, this company, this has to be it until I retire or, you know,
that's
be,
great.
yeah,
That's
this has.
wonderful that you found that and you feel that way. So many people never experience that in their career.
Oh, I know. And I started to wonder if I was ever going to feel that way or experience something like that.
Yeah,
But, you know, everything happens for a reason. And you wind up where you are and you go through the challenges that you go through
yeah,
for a reason, not to get all metaphysical or anything else
sure.
about it. Just that's what I believe. I believe we all are handed the circumstances that we are handed for a reason, and we're never given more than we can handle. At least I don't think we are. But
Yeah.
uh, I think you're definitely an example of these things. And I mean, I'm sure it's probably easier and better to just maintain your mental health now, isn't it?
I think so. There is a certain amount of anxiety and tension that comes with running a business, that's your own business. But, um, but I had that before as well. So, and I just feel happier, um, in general. Whereas before, I'm a pretty happy guy, but I wasn't very happy with work for a long time. So, yeah.
So, when you look back on your life and career, and just it can be, whether it's through your corporate career, whether it was the transition after,
Yeah.
the big quitting incident, Is there anything that you wish that you could go back and do differently or change, or are you like, nope, this all happened for a reason, I'm good?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like if you say that you wouldn't change anything in your past, you're not being honest with yourself, because we make mistakes. I'll admit, like I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was um, uh, switching from engineering to getting a degree in Italian, because I still could have got my business degree, right? It was, and I think the engineering degree would have opened up doors for me that were closed, that I tried to get into, but that were closed. And if I had that degree, I could have gone there. So, like, certainly I would change that. Would I have, not rage quit? Yeah, probably. I wish I had approached that, a little, with a little bit more humility and a little bit more maturity, but I didn't, and I survived. Uh, would I, 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 as I became an entrepreneur and dealt with a different set of situations, I feel like, and I don't know if this is that or if it's just me getting older, but I've sort of kind of settled in where I don't really have expectations of people, other than I know most people are going to do what's in their best interest. Uh, and so I look more at what their motivations are. And if I can deal with their motivations, I can deal with the people. And if I think somebody has motivations that are going to cause trouble for me, then I carefully distance myself. And whereas before I kind of saw people as bad and good, and I really don't anymore. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I've met some evil people, but I've never met a murderer, or a serial killers, or child trafficker or something like that. Like, I've never been involved with those kinds of people, and I'm sure I would think those people are evil. I've never met anybody I think is evil. People have disappointed me, um, but I really, I think most of the disappointment came from me not understanding what their motivations were, what was driving them, and honestly, like, being a little selfish, thinking a little too much of myself, and sort of feeling betrayed. And I just don't feel betrayed anymore uh, when those kind of situations came up. So I don't know if that's just maturing, or if that's just kind of been driven into me by the whole entrepreneur experience.
I heard a lot of really great life advice there, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff in there that I've not only lived and agree with, but also some stuff I myself could walk away with from this episode and think about differently. So, overall,
Great.
just in general, this was amazing, Paul. I really
Appreciate it.
enjoyed hearing your story. And before we talk about um, how we can find you, how we can work with you, I
Sure.
think you alluded to that there's another project upcoming, like another company. Did I hear that right, or am I doing
Refactored group. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually kind of talked a little bit about. I just didn't mention Refactored Group. So Refactored Group has the same shareholders as Razoyo, but it is really the company that owns our intellectual property. So the service that handles the checkout for online firearms merchants, it's called Automatic FFL. That's actually a Refactored Group property. And then our new products, our new SaaS products that we market and that we build for ourselves, those are all part of Refactored Group. So it's really a way of splitting out the work we do from clients, that's Razoyo, and then our own SaaS properties, that's Refactored Group.
I just wanted to emphasize that I usually like to ask what's on the horizon, what's next, so that I'm doing a lot of episodes today, so I'm just like, okay,
So two things on the horizon. Yeah, two big things on the horizon for us. So one is we are launching new SaaS product, and I can't really talk about it, but they're in the realm of supporting online merchants. um, we're kind of playing to our base as much as possible. The second is, you know, I think this is just coming for everybody in the software development space. Is we're learning how to use artificial intelligence uh, to do our jobs, and you're going to see some pretty big changes in the way we approach our work, which until now you couldn't really do. The artificial intelligence is just not good enough, and it still has a lot of limitations. Like anybody that tells you that artificial intelligence is going to take over software engineering, they're trying to sell you something. So I'd be careful there, but it will have a big impact, and it's already had a big impact in the way that we do sales and marketing and writing and all website design, etc. I don't know anybody that does it without artificial intelligence assistance anymore. Yeah, and software development, is about to take a big leap, and we're kind of retooling our whole enterprise. So you'll probably see me talk a lot about that on my LinkedIn account over the next few months.
I think I need to start running a tab on how many consecutive episodes that somebody mentions artificial intelligence,
Yeah,
because I've done several episodes here of late, and I feel like virtually everyone has either revolved around AI or has at least mentioned it a little bit.
yeah,
And I know I'm working more on my end to understand it better and
yeah.
to even utilize it to make my life a little easier. So, whether you're listening to this episode right now or you're listening to me live, you get on board with AI if you're not already. And that's coming from somebody who is really like very much a novice on AI.
Yeah.
So I know I'm doing my part to educate myself and get better.
It,
Uh,
yeah, it's the web and the internet of the late 90s,
yeah.
2000s and early 2000s. It's a step change in the way that we work. Is
Well,
there's no escaping it.
there is also no escaping the question of how can people find you? How can they work with you? And feel free to add anything else.
Absolutely. The best two ways to get in touch with me, and if you have, if you're a non-technical person, or a CTO that or a startup that needs to go from kind of your prototype to something that's scalable for production, that's the kind of problem that we solve extremely well. We will take the mess and turn it into something that works well and is performant. And so the best place to contact me for that kind of thing is on Razoyo.com. Because if you just go to the contact page, put your information in there, it will get to me, and I'll be happy to to take a look at it and set up a meeting. The other place is on LinkedIn, and it's pretty easy. It's /PW Byrne, PWBYRNE on LinkedIn. Just look me up there, and tell me that you heard about me on Mark My Words, and I'll definitely accept your invitation and be happy to connect over LinkedIn. So those are the best ways to do it.
Well, Paul, I appreciate you accepting my invitation, which I believe was even your invitation
Could have
or
been.
request to be on Mark My Words. Again, this was Paul Byrne. He is the president of Razoyo and president of Refactor Group, and he is not going to be defined by being a rage quitter
Thank
because
you.
he and I think it's a brilliant way to kind of brand yourself and get people's attention for sure. But you're definitely more than just a race quitter. You're a winner, and you're making it happen out there. And I think you have a ton of wisdom and a ton not only to teach us about in your, in technology, but also just in life. And I thank you for being on Mark My Words today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure.
All righty. Well, as I mentioned, this is Mark My Words. I'm Mark Schmidt, and this was Paul Byrne. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Bye for now. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.